and we had 12 straight weeks of what the Centers for Disease Control called an epidemic of influenza-like illness and pneumonia, an epidemic in terms of death rates. England saw 8,200 people die in 3 weeks, mostly the elderly. This year, we looked at 19 of 20 weeks, epidemic levels, influenza-like illness, double pneumonia, and death. The CDC called it the flu. Most of the media we received called it the flu. I'm here tonight to tell you it was not the flu. In fact, many doctors were echoing the words of one nurse supervisor who said, "I don't think anyone knows what's causing this sickness." Doctors were saying this to the New York Times. And unlike flu that takes time to spread through a population, these illnesses were appearing virtually overnight in neighborhoods, communities, and cities, swamping hospital wards. And what the media never remarked on was that the incident of heavy spraying, the characteristic X's, the gel falling on parked cars and windshields and buildings, took place always at the same time, and within 24 to 48 hours, we saw these outbreaks of illness. Yes, some of it was the flu, but very little of it was influenza. The medical director for the Via Christi Regional Medical Center said, he told reporters, "This thing kills even healthy people in 4 to 5 days, and I have a stack of email of aunts and uncles and family members who suddenly contracted pneumonia, although in good health, and were dead within a week." But when the WHO and the National Respiratory and Enteric Virus Surveillance Labs tested more than 18,000 people since last October, they found that 13% tested positive for influenza, the national average during an epidemic. In some areas, the peak, they tested 33% positive. Again, the national average was down around 13%. Reporters asked the CDC, "What is this?" And they said, "This illness could be due to some other pathogen." And when I looked at the heavy spray days by city, I again got an exact correlation. No, I do not have scientific proof, scientific evidence, but folks were way beyond coincidence here.
I'm Noam Chomsky. You're watching Working TV.
And as I followed leads from Mr. Wallace and started contacting people across the United States, I ran into meningitis outbreaks in the wake of this strain. This has been a rare inflammation of the brain and spinal cord, and comes on with flu-like symptoms, a skin rash, a stiff neck, severe headaches. And you know, we're still running into those symptoms after heavy spray days in schools and communities across North America. In Belle River, just outside of Windsor, there were 3 cases and 1 death among 3,000 people, and they vaccinated everyone. Multiple sclerosis started showing up. Chronic fatigue has been a major component linked to the spraying, as well as lupus outbreaks in Oklahoma, Kansas City, Florida, other locations in the wake of heavy spraying. And then this came up, transverse myelitis, something so rare we rarely see it, and yet at the Cedars-Sinai Hospital in LA, 8 cases in 2 weeks after heavy spraying there hit people, pets, goats, other animals. So what do we have here? Well, we have a worsening epidemic over the past 2 years of a flu-like illness that has not been identified, a flu that is not the flu. We have, according to the CDC, an epidemic of deaths from influenza-like illness, pneumonia, and cardiac arrest. Now, since when is cardiac arrest a symptom of the flu? But that's what the CDC is reporting. And I've been a reporter and a columnist dealing with alternative health issues for years, and I have wondered at the sudden upsurge and predominance of autoimmune type diseases. We just mentioned a few: chronic fatigue, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis. Virtually overnight in the past few decades. Yes, our immune systems are under increasing attack, but I believe we are under other attack as well. I got back in touch with Dr. Garth Nicholson, and he told me that now he believes that if we look behind chronic fatigue, multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, and lupus, in many cases, we are going to find mycoplasma, because that's exactly what he is finding, and he's also finding brucellosis. Well, as Yogi Berra said, it's deja vu all over again, because this took me right back to my research for bringing the war home and my research into biological warfare and Gulf War illness. And I'm here tonight to suggest very, very strongly that many of the illnesses that afflict us today in ever-growing numbers and severity were hatched in biological warfare laboratories and have now escaped, whether intentionally or accidentally, and are now among us today. I'll have some good news in a while, I promise. But let's follow this line of inquiry. Brucellosis developed as an aerosol during World War II at Fort Detrick, premier biowarfare lab on this planet. I talked to Don Scott, the author of the Brucellosis